Okay, let me go back to sharing. Back again. Can you still see my screen?
I can see start recording.
All right, cool. Oops. See that's it. All right, so our first part of our agenda, WordPress news and events. We got a couple things to share here, and again, the goal of this is just to bring to people's attention some things that are happening in the community, either specifically WordPress.org related or different events going on. So one reminder is that it's that time of year again for the survey, the 2020 meetup survey from WordPress. This is the email that went out from WordPress.org. I'll send a link to the survey afterwards when I send out the information about the recording of tonight's webinar, as well as the Facebook information. As you can see, it really just takes a couple of minutes to fill this thing out, but it does help. I think it helps. So WordPress.com WordPress, the organization, for people who are not familiar, they're actually the ones who sponsor and pay for our meetup group. So Meetup, believe it or not, does charge people to run meetup groups. So by answering the survey, it helps the WordPress group to see that we're running an active meetup. I think it also just helps Peter and myself to understand, what do you think? Do you like the format? The things that we can change? So that a lot of that feedback does anonymously get shared back with us. So it's a good thing for you to share your opinion. If you like the group and you've been attending for a while, we definitely would appreciate you taking a few minutes to complete the survey. It closes at the end of the month, and like I said, I'll send out the link to it afterwards with the links to other materials from tonight. So that's one thing, survey. The Northeast Ohio WordCamp. This one was scheduled. Ooh, did I not change the dates? These dates are wrong. Go to their website. It's not in the past, April 16th and 18th. It's actually May. It's coming up in May.
Yeah, May 21st to the 23rd.
There you go. So it's free. I don't know if they've announced the full track of speakers yet, but this is one of the first ones in the US that's coming up. So there'll be a bunch of these coming up in the next few months or so. We won't highlight them all, but we'll at least bring up ones that I think are worth to mention. So again, take advantage of the fact it's free at this time. Sign up too, even if you, again, hopefully you do attend it live, but even if you don't, at least by signing up, you'll be on their mailing list for any resources they send out, etc. So this one, like I said, is coming up next month. So a tool or plugin spotlight. Peter, this is yours.
Yeah, and I'm going to share one other event that's coming up. Sure. And might happen before our next meetup, and that is the Page Builder Summit.
I saw that. Yep.
It's at pagebuildersummit.com. Nathan Wrigley, who has a WP Builds website and podcast and Facebook group, is one of my favorite WordPress contributors. He and the folks he works with are great, and the Page Builder Summit is something that they put on. This is going to be the second year, and it's really good. And if you're Elementor and Beaver Builder, and hopefully I think they're going to put more of the block editor in because it's considered part of that. But yeah, they put on a great program. Agreed.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's one too where if you sign up, they do make the recordings available for a limited time. Then afterwards, they have a VIP thing where you have to pay for it. So yeah, either see it live, ideally, or shortly afterwards, watch the recordings.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right, so I will show. Let me close these windows here,
sure.
And then I'll take over. Right.
Yep.
So many windows and so many tabs. Okay. All right, tell me what you see. Anything yet?
Yep, it's the WordPress admin.
Scrolling right now?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm going to highlight two plugins that I really like. As most of the folks who are returners here know, that I've embraced the block editor and do my best to work with it, but there's certain things about it that could always be better. And there are two tools that I really like. So one of them is the this block navigation plugin. It's on the repository. It's free, and it allows it gives you an area where a sidebar. It's funny, we're going to use that word sidebar a lot tonight, and this is an example of how there's so many different definitions to the word sidebar. But a sidebar for managing your blocks that you have on your editing page. And then another option, another thing that's kind of nice is the editor block outline. And that is, I actually use a bit of CSS to do what this plugin does. And I think there's another plugin that does similar things. So I'm trying to decide, my favorite on this. But I'll show you the difference here when I'll go to a post here, and I'm going to edit this post. And when you're in your post, you just you click to edit a block, and it pops up like here and all, and you look at your post and your block features. I'm going to enable both of these plugins right now. So I'm going to enable activate the block navigation, and I'm going to activate the editor block outline. And now when I reload this, what I get is, the first thing I get is this outline when I'm going over a block, and it tells me what the block is and kind of gives me an idea of the area of what it is. It says this is the list block. It's in core. If I had other blocks, there's any number of block packages. I use generate blocks, for example. They're the cadence blocks, and it would say cadence block and whatever that is. But it's a nice way to quickly know what you're looking at. The block navigation plugin now gives me this extra little bit of there's a selector at the top here. And when I click on that, I get all my blocks, but in a nice kind of drag and drop way where I can actually manage those blocks here. And you could see how that content is changing just by moving these blocks around on using the block navigation. And when you're authoring a post and you're putting a bunch of stuff and you're putting your images will be here. Any block that you have will show up in the block navigation. If you have something inside of something, it'll show up kind of like what happens up here when you go to your list view of your blocks. But now with the block navigation, you can actually really work on those. The list view will get you to a block, but now when you can see it works together, hey, I've now highlighted that block, but maybe I want to move that up here. And this little navigation is really great when you're authoring something and you want to start editing it and going, oh, I want to move this to here and all. But it's a great way that allows you to just get content into your post and then be able to manage it. And then you've got, if you right click on it, the block settings, you can remove the block, things like that. But those two little tools, just outlining that block and then having this option of a navigation tool where you can start, managing, click on that, and maybe I go, oh, I want that, down here, and it'll just take care of it. Two great little tools that just make that block editor that much more, I think, user-friendly.
Because that was one of my pain points. Like you can drag them from inside of the block editor itself,
Absolutely.
but sometimes when you want to drag something down very far, or it's like placing it always, I found that confusing. So this is a nice one. It seems like it's more precise in placement.
Exactly. And it acts as kind of an outliner where you can really see what you're doing. And then as when you put images in, right now, this particular post only has, these types of things. I'm going to leave that. Let's see if I have a post that might not have much more. A lot of these posts were done through Faker Press, which allows me to just kind of load dummy content. There's my separator, right? So I want to move the separator there. You can see how they're labeled with it all. But great little tool. I don't want the more bit. This was generated, so I'm just going to remove that here. Obviously, I could have done it by doing it there, but it's just this option that you have to manage your blocks.
Nice.
Any questions on either of those, or if anyone's used it, be interested in your feedback.
I have not. It looks good.
Okay.
All right. So let's jump in to the main presentation. Let me knock you off, Peter.
You take over.
Let me share. Okay, can you see my screen?
Let's
I'm
see.
going to stay in the outline mode just for now, because I may pop around to Chrome as well. Can you see my screen though? Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, so this is our main topic tonight. And like I said, just from our agenda, we're going to break it up a little bit. So part one, I'm going to cover the headers, footers, headers and footers, and Peter's going to cover widgets, sidebars, and full site editing. And we'll have a break in between as well. And as I'm speaking to, I mean, we have a small enough group here. You can certainly feel free to unmute yourself and bring up a question or put it in the chat window. Peter will watch the chat window while I'm speaking. I'll do vice versa when he's speaking. So however you feel more comfortable. All right, so we'll do some quick speaker introductions for folks who don't know Peter or myself, and we'll get into the meat of things. I'll do headers and footers, like I said, around 30 minutes or so, and a Q&A for my section, sidebars, Peter's section, and then another Q&A, and then we'll do some final thoughts as well, too. So real quick about me, I'm Ray. I've been about 25 plus years in IT, primarily as a software developer. I'm working for large corporations, been using WordPress for 4 to 5-ish years or so. I'm self-employed right now as a website developer, designer. I never like to say designer, developer. I live in Newington, Connecticut, married, no kids. We have one crazy old cat, and I am a geek. And Peter.
I'm Peter. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I've been working in marketing and communication and supporting sales staff for a whole bunch of years, and technology has always been a way that I've done that. WordPress is where I landed. It's the tool that I use. I'm out of corporate, and I work for myself and my small group of clients. And yeah, I spent a lot of time in WordPress forums and Facebook groups and all. Love helping people with WordPress, and I guess that's why I'm here tonight and every month. So.
All right, so let's start off talking headers and footers. Like I said, this is one of those basic concepts in WordPress. There's actually a lot to it, and this, as Peter will cover later, just like everything in WordPress, everything changes. So there's changes coming soon, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So again, for folks who are really new to WordPress, or just a quick crash course reminder, you know, when you look at a WordPress page or a post, it's made up of different sections. And obviously this varies depending on, you know, what your page or post is. But in general, these are kind of the areas, the common areas of WordPress. So you have your header on the top, then what's called kind of the body or the content in the middle. And then below that is the footer. And not always, but you know, typically a lot of themes support having sidebars, and sidebar could be on the left side, the right side, or both. So what I'll start talking about a bit is this top section here, the header. So, you know, what is a header? It's everything at the top of a page up to that content area that I showed. So everything above that. And typically the header displays on every page or post, you know, so as you're navigating through a site, that's one of the pieces, you know, this will display typically for every page. There are some exceptions to that. One big exception is like for people who create what are called like landing pages. So if you're creating a page, let's say whose whole sole purpose is to, you know, collect contact information from a lead. So let's say you put something on Facebook, you want them to come to this page. All you want them to do is enter their information. In that case, you don't want a header, because a header will, you know, distract people and they'll move elsewhere on your site. So that's one example where you may not want a header, but typically every page or post will have that top section. So what normally goes in there from a WordPress standpoint, that's the place where you'll have your navigation menu or menus, depending on you know what kind of style you're using. That's also typically the place from a WordPress standpoint where your site logo will get pulled in. Your site tag, title and tagline are also part of that header. They don't display. You won't see them usually on the front end, but on the back end, that's where that information is getting pulled into. So again, the header is another one of those things where we didn't dive too deep into responsive or mobile, but headers are going to look different or should look different depending on what kind of device you're looking at. So that's a consideration where certain things that may look good on desktop won't look good on mobile and vice versa. So again, don't forget to consider mobile devices when you're thinking about headers. So again, what would you put in a header beyond the WordPress stuff? What do a lot of websites typically put in their headers? Things like calls to action. Again, if you think about the header as something that shows up on every page, that's a good place to draw people's attention and focus. So think about, what do you want your visitors to do? What's your goal and what's their goal? I'll show some examples of call to actions a little bit later. So that's a good place to put something very prominent. Site search is another one too. Again, this is more for your visitors. If you have a site that's really heavy in text or a blog, for example, the header is a great place to put a little site search icon. And fortunately, WordPress, that's kind of built in for you. So it's just exposing that. Things like banners. So, temporary information. A lot of businesses last year, especially, and still now, have banners about COVID precautions. So that's a good place to put something prominent. Things like sales, Black Friday sales, you typically see that in the header. Cookie agreements too, so a temporary thing where somebody has to accept or agree to something. The header is typically a good place to do something like that. If you have an e-commerce site, your shopping cart, again, it's something that follows you throughout the site. So if somebody's adding items, you want to have a quick way for them to go click back and complete the purchase and checkout process. So the header is a good place. And social media links too, again, kind of going back to contact information. So having that in the header is convenient for people to find. So we'll look at just a couple examples of headers. Again, these are from larger corporations. So like Lush, this cosmetic corporation. So if you look at their website, in their header, they have, again, their site logos off to the left. And again, logos can be in different spots in your header, depending on how you style it. They have a couple of calls to action in this case. So, they have one for tracking an order, chatting, so you get a customer service rep, and then another one for doing a store locator. So you don't necessarily need one call to action. We'll look at another example after this where they do have one prominent. So it really depends on your goals. In this case, they're also thinking of their visitors. What do their visitors typically want to do? So, track orders, et cetera. So in a lot of cases, the call to action here is they don't want people calling their service line. So instead, it's self-service on their website. And then you can see the primary navigation below. So that's below their logo. So here's just one example of what a business puts in their header. Well, we'll take a look at just another quick one. So this is, I think, of Chick-fil-A. So again, very similar, two calls to action, but one's more prominent. They made one a button, order food, or you could think about other businesses where this is call. So this could be a phone number or something. So again, having a big red button there in the header just makes it so that people are more likely to click on it. Here's an example of a banner message. So they have a temporary banner up there for COVID-19, just saying what are their safety precautions. And then they have a smaller call to action off to the side, find a restaurant. So these are just a couple examples. I mean, you can look at hundreds of websites and you'll see different things, but there's kind of a pattern to this. Look at larger websites like Amazon, et cetera. These are, you can get some ideas of different elements that businesses put in their headers. So what is a header, at least from a WordPress standpoint? So a header is, it's a file. If you look in your theme folder, depending what kind of theme you're using, you'll typically find a file called header.php. So it's, as the name implies, it's a PHP file, but it may also contain multiple parts too, depending on how your theme is written. So some themes break apart things like navigation into its own separate file, which then gets pulled into this header PHP file. Some of the stuff you'll never look at, but it's just more of, just from help you understand what's going on here, because there's no magic behind this thing. One thing that it contains is this line of code, which is the WP head function. So that's in there so that your theme or other plugins, like, Peter was showing a plugin a minute ago, plugins hook into actions from WordPress or your theme. So putting this function in the code, it allows other plugins to then do things that they want to, like that banner that we just looked at, for example. So this banner is probably being inserted into a function that the theme exposed. So that's one thing that really needs to be in that header file. And then it contains a head tag, and we'll talk about this in a second of what that is. We'll talk about it right now, as a matter of fact. So what's a head versus header? And sometimes these terms are a little bit confusing because they sound so similar, but the head tag is really an HTML thing. It's an HTML element. And that's used for describing like metadata, data about your HTML document. So for example, if you look behind a website, you'll see things like the character set encoding, which is used in this UTF-8. So that just says, what kind of characters does your page support? For example, there's all kind of different foreign language character sets. But probably of more interest to people are things like your scripts. So if you're using Google Analytics, if you're using things like JavaScript, for example, it's inside that head element. That's where you define those things so that your page can load that properly. Same with style sheets, having links to style sheets. That's typically inside the head of the document. So that information is not displayed on a page to visitor, but it's really useful, or it's required in a lot of cases for a page to load properly. So if you're ever curious, I won't belabor this too much, but just looking at this one, for example, if you go look at view page source, that's a quick and dirty way to find the head. So in this example, here's everything in the head. You can see they have a bunch of links in here and scripts, etc. So that's a quick way to get a peek at what's in that head section. So so let's talk about the header. So again, think about the header is the bigger piece of WordPress, which includes this one section about the head. So again, typically in the past, it was kind of hard to, as we'll talk a little about site editing, it was kind of hard to edit these things if you weren't comfortable with code or if you weren't a developer. So I'm going to show 5 typical ways to edit your header or create your header. And these are varying levels of complexity. And again, some of these are changing too, as I said, there's newer things coming along. So let's talk about the old way, which is probably the most complex way, which is manually editing that header.php file. It's not super complicated, and maybe in this case, I'm sorry, I'll make this full screen. Depending on your theme, so the header itself, that header.php file is really part of your theme. So if let's say in the past, maybe you inherited a site, or you're working on a site that you didn't create the theme, but you need to change something in the header. In some cases, you do have to edit that header.php file. Don't edit the parent theme. This goes back to our parent-child themes presentation from a year or so ago. If you want to make changes to header.php, you create a child theme and make a copy of that file, and that's a whole separate presentation of how to do that. But that then allows you, the way that child themes work is your theme will look at the child theme header.php first, and then you could make whatever edits you need. So I didn't go into a lot of code here, but this is just kind of shows you what the code looks like. So again, this way of changing a header, you need to be comfortable with PHP, you need to be comfortable with HTML a bit. So this one's not for the faint of heart if you're not comfortable with either one of those things. But in some cases, if it's a minor change, like in the past, I'll talk about footers a little bit later. In the past, it used to be a real pain to change things like a copyright, like just something simple like that. You'd have to go in and edit one of these files and make that change. So just be aware that this is one way that you can change a header. Fortunately, there are friendlier ways to do it. So some themes provide the ability to change and really create entire headers visually. So rather than going in and touching code, some themes now include theme builders or slightly modified versions of theme builders. So in this case, we're looking at the Cadence theme. So the Cadence theme, even the free one, comes with a header builder, and I believe there's one for the footer as well too. So what you can do here is you can visually, you can see I'm in the header section of this theme, the header settings, and you can drag different components in here, and you can really style things. So you can drop in a logo, you can drop in navigation, you can move things around, you can put in HTML, etc. So it's kind of a mini page builder just for this section. It's not for the rest of the site. The rest of the site is still using blocks, but this theme has provided a simple way to do this, drag components, when we talk full site editing later, I'm curious how are these things going to be affected, but that's, we'll see. But for now, some themes do provide this ability for you. So like I said, it's a mini page builder, but it's a very specific kind of page builder. So again, look for themes. Cadence is one that I know. I'm not sure other ones that do that. I think there was another one I saw recently that does this too. So it's becoming more popular because I think people realize that people want more flexibility in terms of modifying their headers. Some themes do expose parts of the header to you in theme settings. So this is an example from Divi, which I use for building a lot of my sites. So in Divi does have a full-blown page builder and theme builder, but even in the past, before that was available, Divi, and I know some other themes, they allow you to do simple things like adding code to that head section of your header. So for example, that would be a good place. Let's say if you want to add some scripts in there, typically you see like tracking scripts in there, Google Analytics, Facebook Pixel, etc. So you don't have to go into that header.php file and copy and paste all that code and risk breaking things. Instead, some themes provide this area in your settings where you can just paste that in there and don't worry about breaking anything else. So that's another way you can edit header is through your theme settings. A friendlier way, a little bit more robust way, is through the customizer. So some themes, in this case, we're looking at the Ocean WP theme. Some themes let you do a lot more. So it's not the full-blown page builder part, but it does give you a lot more control than just that head section. So in this case, you can do things like change styling. So you're editing the header. Let's say you can change the font style. You can change background colors. You can add images, video, etc. Mess around with the logo. So again, this is depending on your theme itself. Take a look at the customizer. The customizer for your theme may give you a lot of control to do add elements, change elements. So that's always another good place to look. In fact, I would typically go there first and see what your theme has implemented. So this is one of the things, though, that it really, I keep saying about the header, it really depends on who wrote your theme and what they're letting you change. So modern themes and some of the themes that Peter and I typically recommend, they're ones where they're giving the control back to you as the owner of the site. In the past, that first one I showed, the header.php, unless you were a developer or wanted to hire a developer, it was much tougher to change things. So again, things are getting better, I think, with modern themes. And then another quick and dirty way, let's say you just want to add, again, something like the header, the code, the tracking code for Google Analytics or Facebook Pixel or whatever. There are plugins that will just do that part for you. So let's say your theme doesn't have that ability like Divi had that section. So one I've used before is this Insert Headers and Footers plugin. It's a free plugin on the WordPress repository. It's a good quick way for adding tracking code. So install it, again, just copy and paste the tracking code from Google Analytics or whatever you need to paste in there. And the nice thing is this is one too that you can shut it off easily. You can deactivate the plugin. You don't have to worry about touching code. All right, so that's headers. In terms of what's in headers and in like how they work. Footers, fortunately, footers are pretty much the same. There's not a lot of difference between headers and footers, obviously, except for the location. So, a footer includes everything on the bottom of the page below that content or body section we talked about. And it typically same thing. It typically displays on every page or post, but there are some examples where you don't want a footer. So again, landing pages is the one that comes to mind. So to reduce distractions, there may not be, maybe that example, they don't have a header or footer. So what goes in a footer? Some common things that you'll see in there are things like copyright information. So a lot of sites you visit, you'll see, site was built by whoever, or copyright, hopefully current date. Sometimes that's a giveaway of how infrequent a site has been updated, but look at that copyright information. Sometimes secondary navigation menus. So I'll look at an example of that in a second. So you have your primary navigation typically in the header, but let's say there's some other pages that people don't typically navigate to, or like a sitemap. I mean, that's the kind of thing you could include in the footer. Contact information. Again, this could also be in the header, but you see that quite often in sites where that'll be, phone numbers, emails, etc. Just all that contact information for a business, or a link to Google Maps, etc., or maybe the map itself embedded in a footer. Social media links, again, these also could be in the header too, but this is one thing you quite often see in footers. And then, like I said, kind of the stuff that you need on the site, but maybe it doesn't need to take up space in the navigation menu. So things like your privacy policy, terms and conditions, those kind of links. You can link to the pages so that they're always there and available. Or let's say if you have an e-commerce site, what's your policy for returns, that kind of stuff. So it's in the footer, it's available, but it's not necessarily taking up real estate in a menu. So here's just a couple of quick examples of what some footers look like. So this is one from a demo site. So you can see off here that this is a secondary menu. So there could be pages in here, let's say, that are not necessarily the primary ones in the header. Here's that copyright section I mentioned earlier. So, again, current date, and there's PHP functions you can do to pull in. So it's always pulling in the current date. You don't need to hard code this anymore. And then obviously this is the name of the business itself. Contact information's in here. So, if you're a physical business, this could be street location, email, whatever other contact for the business. Hours of operation too, that's something, again, think about what do people typically want to know when they call your business, typically hours, location, those kind of things. So that's something that should be prominent on your website, and the footer is a good place to do that. Another quick example, same kind of thing. So in this case, they got the logo off to the side, they got their social media icons, they've got their contact information, and then sign up for a newsletter too. A lot of times, I think in this particular site, they also have a pop-up, which sometimes people love or hate pop-ups for signing up for the newsletter. But that could be another good place to put it. Have your MailChimp sign-up form someplace where if people want to see it, you don't really have a pop-up, but it's always there on every page. So again, from an editing standpoint, the footer, just like the header was located in a PHP file, the footer is also located in a separate file in your theme folder. So that's called footer.php. Same thing, it could also be broken apart into different template parts. I typically haven't seen footers as granular as I've seen headers, but you certainly can. There's nothing that stops you from doing that. And just like the header had this special function called WP head, the footer has a special function called WP footer. Same kind of thing. So if you look at your template, your footer template file, it should have that kind of function in it so that other plugins and things can hook into it. And it may also define widget areas. I'm not going to talk widgets. Peter's going to cover widgets a little bit later. So rather than covering the first three, because these are really the same, as I said, once you learn the headers and how to manipulate them, footers are typically you work on them the same way of creating them and editing them. But I will talk about one that's slightly different. So I typically don't see headers that have widgets. Footers, though, that's a quick way to add things, content to your footer. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. So the widget areas, which again, we'll define that a little bit later, the widget areas are really defined by your theme. So your theme may support different ways for you to customize your footer. And what you can do is you can drag and drop these widgets into your footer area. So depending on how you've configured it, how many columns you have, etc., almost anything, in fact, I'd say probably anything that's defined as an available widget, you can drag into those areas. I mean, not everything may make sense to, but they should be available for you to pull in there. So that's a really simple way to customize. You don't need to touch any code. You don't need to, as I said, edit that file or mess around with anything else. You can just drag these components to you. The problem with this, though, is it's a bit limited in terms of, this is basically dropping content into that area. It's not necessarily doing anything with styling or anything more complex, but most themes, at least the ones I've seen, do support some kind of widget area for footers.
Yeah, Ray, you'll often use a, like an HTML or text widget and then put code in there. That's one way to be a little bit more specific within the footer, but yet still have the ease of the widget area.
Right. And I was going to show, not for just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into this real deep, but just again to show folks kind of what this at least from a code standpoint, I'm using the basic WordPress. I think I'm using the 2021 theme. Let me just make sure that's active. Yeah, so 2021 theme. And I know this looks like a lot of stuff here, but just to show you real quick what the header and footer looks like. So in this case, there's really not a lot in here. So this is the header file itself. As I said, it really the main thing in here is it includes that head section we talked about. So this is where you can add any scripts, etc. So any kind of tracking code. And then it just has that one call to the head function. So not a lot to it. And then from a footer standpoint as well, it has the navigation. In this case, it has the navigation menu. That's that bottom navigation. It has the widget areas defined in here. And then here's some of that stuff about powered by WordPress. So that's something you'll see typically on the bottom of the site. So as I said, in the past, you'd have to go into these files and edit them. Again, don't edit directly through the theme editor. Make a copy, put it into your child theme folder. But I think this one also provides some ability to change at least some of the information from the customizer, like I think widgets in particular. So this is showing the footer. So here's where you can drag and add things into it.
Yeah.
So again, headers and footers, like I said, I think there's many different ways to edit them and change them. Things are getting easier, I think, for people to get access to. In the past, it was a bit of a hassle. You just go in there and change code. But now, as I said, it's a little bit simpler. Things are getting exposed more. And as Peter will talk about later, really that ability to edit these now in some ways is becoming a lot simpler, at least so we hope. Any questions about, that was a quick run through of just headers and footers, what they are, kind of how they work, really no magic to them. Let me stop my share for a minute.
Yeah, there was a question. I think it's Judith Ann, but are there widgets for a header? And any widget could go anywhere where there is, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, that is called a widget area.
Right.
There are. Somebody.
I muted.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. I typically haven't seen. I'm trying to think of any themes I've seen where they've added widgets to the header area. I typically see in the footer area. It's really up to the theme developers.
Yeah, and that is something that I don't think can be expressed strongly enough. I think one of the biggest challenges that I find when we're working with people who are all using different themes is realizing how much is controlled by the theme, right? So when you're coding WordPress, those little bits of code that tell the site how to work can land in many different places, in plugins, custom code, but so much is in the theme itself. And I'll give a quick little demonstration, just literally clicking through a couple of different themes and say, this theme offers these widget areas, and this theme offers these. There are a number of them that offer many in the pro version of themes, like widget areas or areas that you can turn on and place, say, for example, underneath your header. So that's one aspect. I use a theme called GeneratePress, and I use the pro version. And GeneratePress has what's called elements. Cadence has something very similar if you're in the Cadence Pro, where you can go off to the side, create a whole thing, maybe a whole custom header where you're designing it in blocks, for example, and just using the hooks, that function, just place that at the header. You can say, don't show me, click a button, click a little checkbox that says, don't show me my standard header, but now show this custom thing that I've created. So, and that's a function of a theme, and then a function of a theme that has a pro version that has a plugin that takes that theme and takes it to the next level. So can't begin to explain every possible option there, but so much of this is driven by the themes.
Steve's questions around using the Divi builder, which obviously I use as well. Would I use a plugin to install a COVID notice? You could. That's again, for any theme. I think there's one that I use. It was called like Simple Banner, something like that, and works pretty well. Yeah, it's like Easy Banner, Simple Banner. I can find out the exact name of it. That typically works well with most sites. With Divi and Elementor and other ones that actually do have theme builders. What I've found though is if you're using the Divi theme builder, if you've designed your own header inside of Divi, sometimes these plugins don't play well with that. So I've had some instances where the Divi header that you've designed, this other plugin that's trying to also do something above the header, they kind of bounce around, or one overlays the other. So I'd say test it out, Steve. I think on some Divi sites, you probably haven't used the theme builder on your site, I'd say. So you can probably just get away with installing it. And then the nice thing about those plugins is it's also a quick way to turn on the banner on and off. So yeah, I think Simple Banner is the one I'm thinking of. Other questions from folks? Other ideas of things that people put in your headers or footers that I didn't cover? I think other, like, and contact information, call to action buttons, those are things I typically see. Martha, did you raise your hand?
Let me turn it'd be easier than typing. So to have a header or footer for a landing page, or have it not show, does that have to be written into the theme?
It has to be, it depends on the template that your theme provides. So some themes may provide a blank page template, which doesn't have a header or footer. In those cases, yeah, you're just displaying that content area. So it's one of those, I hate to say, it depends. It depends on what theme you're using. Yeah, some it's easier to hide the header or footer than others. Like the Divi one that Steve was mentioning earlier. That one you can control when you display headers and footers. So for certain pages, I can say, these particular pages hide, don't display them. So I can create a landing page that way.
So I just launched a site that I designed it, but a developer built it for me. And unfortunately, I haven't had like a sign off because he got sick. So is it easy for another developer? So if I don't have a page in there that allows me to drop off the header or footer, is it easy for someone to pick that up and just build me a page like that in my theme?
It's not too bad. I mean, there's several ways they can do it. They can do it through code. They can hide the header or footer on what pages you want. I think again, it would depend on what the theme was that they used to build your site to look at that. It's not.
It was custom. He built it.
It was all custom, yeah.
Sometimes custom themes can be a little bit difficult if you're not the person who actually created it to begin with.
Yeah,
so.
Custom. So one of the simplest ways to do it is to literally find the CSS element and hide it. That's one of the that's just purely so it actually is being generated, but it's being hidden by CSS. So that your style sheet would literally not show it. I was just looking. I think there are plugins, there are hooks, there are ways of going into something and say, suppress the header, but I'm not seeing anything. A lot of the stuff that when you get used to the themes that we have, where it literally may be just a checkbox that says hide the header for this page. That's how we're doing the landing pages. So custom themes. It's hard to give advice on custom themes without seeing, is it even based on something? Sometimes a custom theme is actually a child theme built on top of a theme, for example.
And I know there are also plugins. I think I played around with one a long time ago. There are plugins for creating landing pages.
Landing page, you're right. Just gotta go the opposite way.
Yeah, so that would actually just create a page that looks more. That's just strictly the body content. So that might be simpler to use something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Any other exciting header footer questions for me?
Who has a header or footer that you just don't like and you want to revamp? Is there, Oh, everybody's happy with what they have.
Everyone
That's
loves
awesome.
their headers and footers. Yeah. Well, think about it, because we have time at the end. We happy to look
Yeah,
at
we're
your
trying to
header
build
and
in the
footer of
time
your
for
site.
right. Exactly.
Somebody says if you hide the header, if you just hide the header from CSS, will it affect page loading speed? No. So that the header itself would actually get, because the header itself gets pulled down in the HTML. It's just when it gets displayed in a browser, that's when your CSS is hiding it. So it's still there. It's just you just can't see it. It's not. It doesn't display. I think that's the big thing. So
Right.
no, it doesn't affect anything with speed.
Yeah. In that it doesn't improve it.
Right.
If you're not generating it, it would improve it to some degree. But
One quick thing too, and this is again, we won't go down the rabbit hole of talking performance stuff, but a lot of times when you see, if you run like GT metrics or Pingdom, one of those performance tools against your site, a lot of times one of the recommendations is like defer loading of scripts or defer. And so a lot of times what that's referring to is in that head section, you may be referencing something that you don't use until later in the page, or don't use at all. Some themes, Divi, there's like it's always bloated, or like they're pulling in a bunch of things that are never really used in the body. So that could be a place to look, again, to look if you're doing performance. Maybe your theme has it, or maybe the template you're using, whatever is pulling in stuff that that could be causing an issue from a performance standpoint. Is there a plugin that automatically redirect the URL if I change one of the directories in my header? What do you mean by change one of the directories?
I don't know what you call them, but when you like for example, I have art galleries, and I if I wanted to change the name of that would change the URL. And if I'm just wondering, without having to go into my host and change that, if there's
there's a plugin. There's one that I use quite a bit. It's again easy redirection, something like that. All the ones are called easy. That will basically all across your site, whether it's the header or not. Let's say, and that one I use quite a bit. Let's say if I'm redesigning a site and I've renamed a page or moved a page or something. So you basically put in the old URL, whatever the link was, and then you put the new one in. So on the back end of your site, it'll direct people to the right page. So you don't have to change any of those links on your menu. You can leave all that stuff alone. Just when people click on it, it'll redirect them.
great. And that's called easy redirection?
Yes.
Thank you.
Or simple redirect. What's it called, Peter?
I use the one called redirection.
Redirection. That's the one. Sorry.
The one that looks like the pipes.
Yes.
It's just called redirection.
Great. Thanks so much.
We had a question about recording. Yes, we'll have a recording of this webinar afterwards too. Denise, can you go over the navigation menu in the second header, such as adding a second row? Yeah, that's another one too. It depends on your theme, if your theme supports that or not. So some themes do allow you to create multiple, like that example I was showing from the Cadence theme. Let me bring that slide up again. 1 second. This is Cadence WP. 1 minute here. So in this theme, it might be a little bit hard to see. Let's blow this up for a second. In this theme, they actually have the ability to put in something, above and below. So you can put anything up here, you put navigation here, you put something below it. So it really depends on the theme, what they provide you the ability to do. Some themes just give you that one header, one section, and that's unfortunately where you have to go in and do some code or some of these other things to be able to add additional pieces in there.
Yep. And some themes, it's every sentence starts, and some themes will have a very specific secondary navigation, spot, and it may be even defined. I remember I'm going back to the Genesis websites and all. I think some of them had that, and then so in your menus you would assign something to your primary navigation and your secondary navigation, and that choice would then put it in the place that the theme was expecting to see secondary navigation.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Well, folks, think other questions afterwards. Again, this was our little break between my section. But we'll have time after Peter talks as well too. We'll have time to revisit things if you think of other questions. So, Peter, do you want to take the slides or do you share for yours?
Let me take this over. There we go.
I think we're doing good on time.
I think we're right on time. I was hoping people would want to talk about headers and footers for an hour, and I could just sit back and relax. But
No, not
great. All right. So we are on. Yeah, we came off here. So we're on sidebars, widgets, and full site editing. We're talking about the sidebars and widgets, and I'll have a bunch of slides just kind of talking about it, and then we will get into just poking around, showing some of these things on a site so we can kind of demo that. Now, here's something that you've seen, and you can see this okay, Ray? Do I need to go full screen? Looks okay?
Yep.
All right, so this was the slide that Ray showed at the beginning of this presentation, talking about the various areas, the header, the body, the footer, the sidebar. But, you know, really, depending on, it might look like this or any variation in between, where your sidebars, you may have a left sidebar, a right sidebar, multiple header and footer areas. Your theme might give you the option to turn these on or off, use them, not use them. But there's any number of places, you know, a lot of themes, and we'll show, might have just like a left or a right, and maybe some footer sidebars. But they are all basically rectangles. Anything that goes in that rectangle will stack in a vertical way, but you can have all of these different areas that will show up as sidebars for you. Now, so what is it? Sidebars are widget areas. I have here, they're not always vertical or on the side, meaning they're not all just only straight up and down in a long column. They are vertical when you start putting your widgets in, but you can have sidebars next to each other. They're called sidebars because that's where they started. When that original layout that Ray showed was basically what WordPress blogs were. So it was the sidebar. But now, you know, when we talk about a widget area, it is an area where you can place a variety of widgets. Widgets being, we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, but little pieces of code that have output. And then it is important to, and I actually edited this slide, Ray, because you reminded me on the mobile, which, by the way, mobile first indexing is really important. A lot of times, you know, even as we're showing these, I almost feel we should be thinking mobile first. And it's kind of interesting when we do demonstrations showing the 2020 theme. And in the 2020 theme, you had but one widget area, which was the footer. There was no sidebar. And part of that is because of, you know, a theme designed to be seen on a mobile device, a phone first. So it's literally, okay, we're going to put that sidebar, that widget area below your main content. But it's important to understand how then as a site is responsive, that sidebar could and often does drop down below your main content based on, you know, the width of the screen. And sidebars, just like everything, right? You know, they can be added, it's code that can be added through the plugins, the themes, code that's built into, you know, the plugins and themes, of course, but then even custom code. You can go and write code that you add to a child theme or through a snippet plugin like I use, and you can write a custom sidebar. Very often though, and you'll see I mention plugins as a way to do a lot of these things. So we're talking about widget area. What are widgets? Widgets are features or functions that output blocks of content within a defined space. WordPress includes a number of widgets that are part of core. They also can be added through plugins, themes, and code. And then we'll show something, you know, like many things within WordPress, you'll have something that the word is used in multiple places, and it can be easy to be confused, you know, even the word block, right? Widget. sidebar. Is it the sidebar or is it a widget area? Widgets can also refer to, items on the admin dashboard, or in some cases, modules of the page builder. I believe Elementor uses the word widget. I know Beaver Builder uses the word module, but a thing that you're dropping onto your page might be called a widget there. But we're specifically here talking about widgets within widget areas or sidebars. So placing and managing widgets, I'll demonstrate this. We'll go through it, and a lot of you may be familiar, but we'll kind of play with different ways that it can be done. But they can be, you can add widgets through the admin menu, going under Appearance and Widgets. They can be managed in the customizer if the theme allows. I think most themes now have that, or modern themes. I'm not sure if there's any, if I have not encountered where it isn't shown, but since themes have so much control over your WordPress environment, it is possible that the theme, you're not going to see your widget areas in the customizer. But typically, as Ray, you were showing a little bit earlier, you were showing the footer widgets using the customizer.
Yeah.
Specific styles can be applied to widgets. So widgets, this little output can be styled either through the theme itself. Many themes will have like, oh, what do you want your widget area to look like, and what do you want your widget headings, what font size and color and things like that. So there's styles that can be applied to that output. You can write custom CSS if one day we'll actually get into that, I think, but where you have really control even on the individual widget level. A lot of widgets you can put a specific custom CSS class on the widget and then control the way it looks using custom CSS. Sidebar and widget visibility can be dynamic, and I say with plugins. Of course, you can code anything, but there are some neat plugins that allow you to have a lot of control over where and how your sidebars, or even widgets within sidebars, what pages they show on, what categories of posts. A lot of query criteria that can be set, filtering, which gets shown where. I used to use one that when I went to go pull it up for this, and I haven't used it in a while. It hadn't been updated in quite a while, so I'll show a couple other examples. Widgets can be made sticky. That sticky feature where here's this little box of content, and you're scrolling down. Now you make it stay on the screen, and I hope to show you an example of that just using a simple plugin that says how to make something, stick on the screen. Like, when we talk about sticky, many of us are used to things like menus being sticky. You scroll down and the menu stays at the top of the screen. You could even make widgets stay on the screen, and there's reasons you might want to do that, call to action that you just want to stay on the page. And similar to headers and footers, the custom sidebars and widgets can be coded into a child theme or a code snippet, but I do like plugins, so we'll show some examples with that. So what are some of these plugins? Sidebar and widget plugins. Custom sidebars, very, very popular way of having control over adding sidebars and having visibility control. And these other two are very similar. Lightweight Sidebar Manager, made by Brainstorm Force, the people who make the Astra theme, is another way that you can add your own sidebars and decide where you want to place them. Similarly, the Unlimited Custom Sidebars, Content Aware Sidebars is another plugin that will allow you to create your own sidebars and place them where you want to in your site. Some other plugins here are the Widget Options. This is a popular plugin that allows you to, again, control where and how the specific widgets would display. So, you may have a, let's just say you do have a call to action widget, something you've created, it's sitting in a widget. Maybe you even use a plugin that says, click here to something, but you don't want to show it on, your about page if you're showing a sidebar, something like that. These give you control over how your widgets are displayed. If there's any criteria that says, you can even have widgets if you had a site where you had logged in users, for example, subscribers are to log in, and based on user roles, show or don't show certain of these little things that show up in your sidebars or your footers in these widget areas. The QTW3 fixed widget, that's a plugin that is a simple way of making your a widget sticky within a sidebar or widget area. That can also be done through code, and I'll show you this neat little the admin dashboard, the boxes when you go to the dashboard when you first log in, those are also called widgets. And in that dashboard, there's what comes in core, but there's some neat things that can be added, and I like this little dashboard widget suite as a plugin. So, blocks are, and we'll talk about this, and I'll show you, where things are headed. Widgets, I can't remember. I didn't look up. Ray, I don't know if you know, but widgets have been around for a long time, and they've gone kind of unchanged in that time. They work great. A drag and drop. They were, I think, one of the first kind of drag and drop features of WordPress, where you grab a widget and drop it into a sidebar, a widget area, and there it lived. It hasn't been changed in quite a long time. But the block editor, Gutenberg, has given new capabilities in terms of how we manage content. And the future of widgets is block widgets, so using blocks, and that will happen over time. And if time allows, and we're pretty good on time, we're going to get into a full site editing discussion, what that even means. But this idea that you can have your widgets now are going to be in a similar interface to what you're going to use for people who have adopted the block editor. Now you're going to be managing, you'll have the opportunity to manage your widgets similarly. So yeah, that coming soon are the block-based widgets. I will show you in the Gutenberg plugin that is the Gutenberg plugin is the beta testing of a lot of the features that eventually land in WordPress core. To use the block editor, you do not, and in fact should not have a live site where you're relying on the Gutenberg editor. It really is meant to test, because things change. Things that are in Gutenberg might make it to core the next release, or there's some things they're working on that they're not going to make it to core until December, if at all. So that Gutenberg plugin is a great testing ground, but I'll show you, how it affects the widget area now. So I'm going to show, let me move this out. Do you see the earth right now?
Yep.
Okay, great. That's my mail. You don't want to see that. I was looking at one of the upcoming events, Big Orange. So let's go here. So this is just a sandbox playground site. I've got some plugins in here. I've got most things off. This is where I showed earlier the editor block outline plugin and the block navigation plugin, which are now active. But let's start at the very basic. We talked about the fact that the widgets on the dashboard are basically considered widgets, right? So you can take these little elements, you can drag and drop them, you can hide them, you can also, and I'm curious if anybody is running, I run into this now where the open and close and move, and this is kind of coming out of the block. Sometimes I get like, that's the close, this is the move to a different place, even though they're both up arrows. Am I the only one that has clicking on some of the wonky stuff with that? But you also, in case anyone doesn't know, we've shown this before, but in the dashboard, you can turn things off. Maybe you just don't want to see the welcome box anymore. You can turn that off here. It's kind of like a sidebar area. Each one of these boxes are like widgetized areas, but these are specific to the dashboard. I'll show you something while we're here that's kind of neat. There is a plugin that I'll turn on called the Dashboard Widget Suite. And if I activate that, and now I come back to my dashboard, I now have, this is a control panel that I can decide to show or not show, but it has some neat things that you can put into your dashboard. So now your dashboard can become a little bit more useful. You know, there's if I turn on I gotta look to see where it goes. So I turn on the list box. Let me see, widget box. Might have to refresh.
Oh, you're gonna save, I think. Peter, you're gonna save the changes, I think.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's exactly right. You get so used to certain things, like with
You
widget.
had the button hidden though from your screen.
What's that?
You had the button, you had that save button hidden until you scrolled up.
You're
Like, wait,
right.
that's
Yeah. Plus, a lot of things in widgets, they just sort of happen. But yeah, so if I put a list back and save changes, I will now get a, right below here, this list box, right? But I can decide what, by going to the settings, I can decide what I want in that list box. Yeah, to enable, you actually have to create, it's funny, you go in and you create a menu. And in the menus, there is now a dashboard widget suite menu that you would then go in and change. Now, this seems kind of complicated here, but if you're doing something for a client and you have this ability to put in widgets, a kind of functionality that happen on the back end, or if there's certain things that you just go to quickly, you know, you can go and create a menu, drop it into this list box, and I just happen to pull list box up quickly. Or if you wanted to put your social links, and there's, when you go to your settings, it'll be like, okay, what are the links? Maybe you might want to just put your links here and click to it, and so on. You have all these options. I kind of like there's a Usernotes one where you can add notes within this little box and kind of keep track. Maybe you're, hey, you did something and you want to leave a note here for you or for yourself and all. But it's just very similar to what happens with widgets that you put on the front of your website. These are widgets that you can put on the back end in your dashboard. So I thought that was kind of neat. I don't know if anyone's, can think of a use case for it, but for having control, turning the dashboard, and there are other tools where you can, do a full kind of even designed layout kind of thing. But this is a great little suite of tools that you could put in for your dashboard. All right, so as I had mentioned, under appearance and widgets, this is where you're going to see, I'm sure most people are kind of used to it, but this idea of, oh, by the way, that dashboard suite added a widget area where there was a specific thing where you could even put these types of widgets on your, say you wanted to put a picture, you could put an image in there and show it. So it's kind of a neat way of using any number of widgets as a widget on your dashboard. Not that that's not confusing. But this is the widget, this particular theme has a number of widget areas that can be turned on and off depending on, and I think I am in the generate press theme, and that you drag and drop items onto a widget area. And whatever, each one of these widgets may have its own level of functionality. And I save that, right? So now I go to, here's that sidebar, and that's where I put that image. Now, you know, again, you may be used to this, but if I take this and now I want to move, I have a widget called archives. And if I move that above, this is where you don't have to save it. And I refresh this. Now the archives are landing in that sidebar, all these elements in that sidebar. You decide you don't want, you know, you don't want your categories here, you can delete it. So this is where you get control over, you know, what lands in that sidebar. I come back over here, take a look, and now that category section. So you can see the relationship between what's here, and you can open and close each widget. My right sidebar right now has archives, image, and pages. You look at the front end where I'm using this sidebar, archives, image, and pages. So that's, you know, that's a straightforward on using a sidebar. Now you see a whole bunch of sidebars here because of the theme that I'm using. So if I go, I'm using a generate press, but if I change this to, let me see if I can do this in a way that's a little bit clever. So if I go to my widgets in new tab, excuse the clicking around. Now you see these are the widget areas, sidebars I have to use. If I change it to, if I activate Astra and I refresh, I'm on my widgets page, or I just click on widget page again. Now I have I have what Astra is giving me as those sidebars and footers. So for a lot of people, when you're looking at this, you know, and you say, why don't I have what I'm seeing in that tutorial, for example? It's your theme may not output or may not have the code for that kind of sidebar, and these get used within the customizer, for example. I can show you that in a minute, but you know, again, now cadence, if I activate cadence and I reload this, okay, take that out. But now, you know, cadence has sidebar 1, sidebar 2, and footer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each one of these themes, I go to the 2021, activate that. And if you recall from what Ray showed earlier, I think I'm just going to
one footer.
What's that? Yeah,
The
just
worst
that
of the
one.
bunch.
Yeah, other than the dashboard widget suite.
A lonely footer.
But let me take a second to go here and turn and deactivate the dashboard widget so we're not seeing that. Nope. I of course clicked on the wrong button again.
And Astra, while you're doing that, the Astra one you brought up actually had a header widget area, which again, it's
yeah. So let's take a look at that real quick, because that was a question that came up. So so if I go to my theme, I'm going to change it to Astra. Go to my widget area. I'm reloading it. This is all the same site now, just a different page. Now in the header area, let's see if we go to the front end. We don't have to go to the front end, but if I go to customize, and now I look at in the customizer, right, you're going to find that widget area. Oh, you know what? This is probably you have to turn on per page. Because
I think it's using it for the header builder.
There you go. Again, this is where every theme, and if you get used to one and it'll go somewhere else. The header builder is like what you had, where you can add certain elements, but I'm not sure. Am I not seeing it? It may be sometimes, and I'll show you something that sometimes happens. So if I'm here, if I go into this page and I edit the post, under Astra settings, this is where you get, oh, again, these themes. Now I don't see the header one, so I'd have to spend more time on this, but this shows you where this theme is giving you the option to move the sidebar to the left, to the right, or no sidebar. And the question that we had about landing pages, I think the choice is right here. So disable primary header would hide that. That's how using this theme, it's just a click to turn off that header. So we went into header territory.
Peter, a quick question, just to interject, that came up in the chat. So
Yeah.
Rice was asking about, is there a way to easily know what a theme has to offer in terms of like sidebars and all that? I said not necessarily. I mean, it's up to, in my experience, it seems like it's up to the theme developers how well they document their theme and tell you what's available. But a lot of times, unfortunately, you just have to install it on a test site and preview it. You know, again, themes, as we talked about before, in most cases, the theme is non-destructive. So
Right.
in most cases, but still, again, do it on not on your live site. Yeah, if it's not, well, even Sue is saying if it's on the WordPress repository, to tell you basic info. I'm not even sure that's necessarily true. Like as we were talking, I took a look at, like, if Peter goes to look at the 2020 theme, for example, and click on theme details, it doesn't really tell you, unless I'm missing it, it doesn't tell you that it only has one footer area. You know, I don't think they get into that level of detail necessarily. So.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. Themes are a thing. They can be a challenge. That's why, you know, you land on a couple in GeneratePress, Astra, Cadence, in terms of the blank slate ones. Ocean WP, Bloxy, is a great one. Bloxy offers even more options. But like if we went to look at Bloxy and looked at the details. Of course, we're previewing it right now. You'd have to read this, and even then, I don't see anything that's really telling you anything so specific. You could actually try it out through here. But if we,
you really do have to install it someplace and activate it, because then you'll get to see like what have they exposed to, like, you know, what can you do in the theme configuration, what can you do in the customizer, what kind of widget areas do they provide. So
yeah. So here's the Bloxy theme and the main sidebar, and you can see if the main sidebar, the right sidebar, I think that is generally going to be one that's going to share amongst themes. It's like, okay, this is your main sidebar. You could see on another theme, it was the right sidebar, but it kept those widgets that I put there. Sometimes when you jump around into themes, you'll find that if you have a widget area that goes away, those widgets will drop down into this inactive widget area. That's also a place where you can, if you have a widget you've landed up, you know, you say you put a plugin, the plugin has a very involved widget, and you decide you don't want to use it, but you've done a lot of, you know, you've clicked all the different configuration things on it. You can, instead of just deleting it, you could put it in inactive, and it will retain the details that you put in there. You know, again, maybe you have a social media one, you put all your links in there, and then for whatever reason you're like, I don't want to use it, but I don't want to delete it. You could drop it in inactive, and it's there for you to use with all of those. So that's a kind of a nice little feature. If I took the image and took it out, and let's go back here to, this has a different layout because I'm using the Bloxy theme. And in fact, here's where you see it doesn't even look like the sidebar is turned on. That's the thing. Typically, you won't jump around the themes. You'll pick one and you'll get good at it. That's always kind of my advice, unless you really find reasons why you need to get away from a theme. And here, I'm sure this is what I need to do. I'll go here. I'll go into appearance and customize. Again, different theme. My customizer is going to be different. But now here, and each theme that's in the customizer, many themes will have kind of different ways that you can pick your sidebar. So say I'm going to pick no, it's interesting. I'm not seeing it. Oh, I'm not in the. It's the other thing. It's picking which area. This is one thing that I find personally a little frustrating, which is, okay, so I'm looking at a single post, and in the single post, I want to put a sidebar versus a site-wide thing. So That's another thing that people, you know, all of a sudden I got to remember, oh, wait a minute. Right now I'm customizing the blog archive page, which is like your list of posts, or I'm looking at single post. And now I'm customizing, well, where do I want my sidebar to show up in my single post? On the left, on the right, you know, maybe not at all. So using your customizer, again, defined by the theme, allows you to have kind of this level of control. The whole reason I got to here was even just showing in that widget area, the fact that that image was gone. But anyway, I hope you get the idea of that. So, you know, bouncing around and showing you different themes, you know, we can go on and on, but if you're looking at Bloxy, Astra, Cadence, GeneratePress, and I know I had asked, I know a few people do use Astra, and we're using Cadence and GeneratePress a lot. All of these have a level of control over sidebars, placement. Are you turning them on the archive? Are you turning them on pages, posts? The difference being, of course, your blog posts, pages that are set, and pages you might not want to have your sidebar. You only want to use your sidebar on your posts, because that might be where you include things like your archive links and things like that. I'll show you under widgets. Let me see what I wanted to show. I've got my list over here. Add widgets to sidebar. Show widget option example. Okay. Add widgets to sidebar. Okay. So if I wanted to add a plugin, and that instead of going in and going through the add plugins, you know, I just pulled one out. I pulled the Mex Smart Author widget. That's a plugin. Now all of a sudden you're going to have this new widget. I go into appearance and widgets. I now have, excuse me, Mex Smart Author. That wasn't there before. The plugin put it there. If I take that and I drop it into my main sidebar, which I'm now showing on posts, and this is where, you know, this particular plugin that adds this widget that you can add to a widget area has a whole bunch of options that you can turn on and off. This is an author box, and you can say, all right, well, who are we going to show? And on that, we're going to show mine. Automatically detect author is kind of neat because it decides, you know, well, who is it? That's probably the most functional use. Display the name. So these are all kind of little options that you would set. Now, if I save that and I come back to my posts and I link to that, here's that widget, right? So this little widget just made this simple little author box, but it's a widget that's put there. Now, if you had a footer widget, maybe you want to put it there, for example. But that's a neat little widget you have. Here's another widget plugin that I just recently found. I said, oh, that's a neat little thing that I think people would like to see. Let me go back to plugins, and I think I have it installed, just not activated, which is recent posts widget with thumbnails. Let me activate that. Now I come over here. Okay, it's not there now. Oh, so so in the customizer, I wanted to show you this. So I've been showing you in the appearance widgets, but in the customizer, and of course, I got to look because I'm on a different theme and where did they put it? But here's widgets, main sidebar. All right, so now same type of interface, right? So, you know, and you can see when I drag and drop this, you're actually seeing things happen on this right side, well, except for the Mex didn't move up. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, if I add now when you go to add a widget, now your widgets are all listed here, and I just added a plugin that gave me a new widget called Recent Posts with Thumbnails. And that has a whole bunch of options, right? All of this is a ton of options. But if I publish this, and I'm not changing any of the, options to see. Let's see if it took. It did not. Why did it not take? Give me a sec. Did I not save it again?
I didn't see.
Oh, okay. So this is something that happens too. Your theme is 7 widget areas, but this particular page doesn't display them. I'm on the archive page. I haven't told the archive page to show me a sidebar. Now I'm on the blog post, the single page where I did turn on the sidebar. And now I can see what I've put there. So let me put this on the top, and let me see what the open show post, do not show, show sticky, do not show. You know, and sometimes you find something doesn't want to work with, say, the theme that you have. Show thumbnail. Publish.
Hey, Peter, quick time check.
Yep. Let me not spend too much time. What this does typically is it'll show you your list of posts with a little thumbnail next to it. Pretty awesome when it works. What's kind of interesting is I wonder if I very quickly come over here, come up to my appearance, my themes. Let's change back to generate press. Activate that. We're almost done with this area because there's one other thing that I didn't want to show. Yeah, it's not showing the thumbnail, so I must not have something. But that's the widget. Normally, there's a little thumbnail with your featured image. But the last thing I want to show you here is where it's going with the Gutenberg block editor. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to activate the latest version of Gutenberg. Remember, Gutenberg is beta. It's where WordPress is going as they take things out of Gutenberg and decide to roll it into core. All I've done right now is I've just activated the Gutenberg plugin. And now when I'm in the Gutenberg plugin, let me just reload this page. And actually not here. Let me go to my widget area. It is there. See, this is all new, and it's funny. I don't feel bad because I've watched a number of people in this last week do a lot of like live demos with the whole Gutenberg and full site editing, and lots of people are getting confused because it changes often. Let me go to widgets. Let me go to the right sidebar. Did I not activate it?
Gutenberg's activated.
Gutenberg's activated. Let me make sure.
Do you have a conflict with some other widget plugin, Evan?
Could very well be. So let me get rid of some of those other things. Yeah, something. Okay. All I want to do is this and go to. It should just work. I should. Okay. Enable.
There you go.
Yep.
You forgot the magic.
It's a little click box hidden somewhere. I apologize for wasting your last time, you know. But by the way, when you see the mistakes, then you can go, oh, wait a minute, you know. Now what happens? So now what happens when we go into widgets? I go to the right sidebar. Come on, don't make me a liar. This is also theme dependent. So let me change the theme. basically what we should be seeing is that
Yeah, what they do.
Bloxy, that's why.
It's like go. Yeah.
I should try this.
Yeah.
Not gonna do it. Let me go back here, and then I'll cut you loose. But basically, what changes? Here we go. It's not the customizer. Now we're back to where I meant to be. So now under appearance appearance widgets. Now instead of that whole widget drag and drop here, now your widgets are blocks. Okay, this is where we're going with block editing and the full site editor. So now if I want to add a widget, when I click on my widgets up here, so I'm in a block editor type, I can look at, here are all my widgets that I normally saw in that list on the left of the screen as I was dragging and dropping them into these widget areas. Now we're working within the block environment. So, you know, you could take your latest posts and drag them there and treat these like blocks and move them around, you know, like you would a block. If it has choices, you have these kinds of choices where you can see all of the options that you have, you know, depending on how things are written, and even the plugin developers have to be able to go in there and say, okay, I'm block enabled, and I'll allow you to close the block the way you want to, and so on. But this is where we're going with the widget area being driven by blocks, where you're literally going to be adding blocks like you would in your editor. Now, I'm going to jump ahead real quick to some things on the full site editor. That this is nothing to be afraid of, because you don't have to have this on if you don't want it. This is not going to, what they've learned from the first version of Gutenberg going into the block editor is, let's not force feed too much. Let's make it available, and let's let people kind of work their way into it. But there's a lot of things that are coming that will move from the Gutenberg plugin into core, but that you still have control over whether you're going to use, for example, widgets as a block. Eventually the widget area will become blocks, you know, over some period of time, but nothing quickly. So that's what I had for the demos. I apologize for the little hiccup here on this widget area. I think we're questions. If there's any questions, I can leave this.
Just kind of one, so kind of a wrap up with this, and I think that was a good ending. So full site editing, and Sue, I think, has to leave too, but I don't know if you watched the same YouTube video that I saw too, Peter, but there's a good one that was presented recently at one of the mega meetups that they had.
Yep.
So I'll send out a link to that in our notes, where she talks through a bit about you know, what's coming with full site editing, what it is, what it's not. So for again, people who don't know, in WordPress, hopefully this year 5.8-ish, like June or July, that release I think is going to start including some of those pieces that Peter showed, that right now you can see today, preview to the Gutenberg plugin. But yeah, the gist of it though is people have seen, you know, WordPress has been around for a while. So one of the challenges I think is there's a lot of overlap in terms of concept and ways that you can do things. So I think what full site editing is trying to accomplish is taking this new block model, and again, not so new anymore, and really trying to unify some things. So I think that's always been a complaint about WordPress from beginners, even people who've used it for a while. There's 5 different ways to do the same thing.
Right.
I'm not saying it's going to emerge into one, but I think they're now trying to take this idea of everything's a block, or everything can be a block,
right,
and then moving that into the full site editor. So hopefully over time it won't look so completely different. Like, you know, what you do with widgets won't look completely different than what you do with headers, etc.
Right. So this, I'm going to do a lightning thing on this, because this is based on that mega meetup and what the most excellent Ann McCarthy presented. And this is sort of a summary of that presentation. We'll give the link, the link to it. But yeah, using that block model and editing experience beyond the post page content, basically, through everything, make the entire site customizable, empower users to manage their sites, all part of where it's coming. It's not going to be released all at once. It will not eliminate what you have or how WordPress works for you. Initially, it's meant, the theme developers are going to have access to some kind of key points. What's it going to do? Your page templates, your post templates, your 404 page, archive, the header, footer, all of these things you'll be able to work within the block editor. In fact, in some of the demos, it literally kind of on the same page where you had to look to see at the top of the screen, oh, I'm now editing the header. I'm now editing the footer, because you're looking at them all at the same time. The milestones that they're talking about in terms of, the theme blocks, all of the things that are all kind of spelled out. But I think it's important for most of us to understand the gradual adoption and slow rollout at the user's pace is kind of key to what they're looking to do. The next release, they're targeting July 20th. They're going to move in. I mentioned Gutenberg being that beta for a lot of what goes into core. So whatever is decided that does go into core, they are introducing, they're planning to introduce new blocks, those tools for the theme builders, the widget screen and block widgets that I just showed you in a rough sort of way, sorry about that, will show up in the customizer. Then, again, the key takeaways, it's not going to take over your site. Block-based widgets will not require full site editing. So there was a kind of a key talk about the fact that these things are components and kind of in collections. And that's what will, a lot of these things will work together, but not necessarily require, like if you wanted to use the navigation block that's coming out, it doesn't mean you have to go turn on full site editing and be in a whole different kind of world. Page builders and site builders will still work. Your themes will still work. Everything will still work until and as you decide to implement a lot of the things that we're talking about. And but that's was a lot of what was presented in kind of a lightning round. But those are the key points to kind of get across. We don't have time to go through the full site editing because I like many of the presenters who showed it will fumble through far worse than I just did with the.
And it's also, as you said, it's one of those things where it's still changing too.
Yeah.
We kind of had this with the original Gutenberg before it was launched and became block editor. So I think for folks, like I said, 5.8 could be a pretty significant WordPress release, or at least the beginnings of that. So I think we'll always try to, we'll be talking about it for quite a while, and I think we'll kind of demo new things as they become available.
Yeah, and these things, this has all been pushed out a lot. There's a very, very interesting how the sausage is made meeting that just took place like on the 15th, and they shared the video, and you can go see the top people, Josepha and Matt Mullenweg, and all the people making the decisions on this, literally doing demonstrations and then talking about what's working and not working. Matt Mullenweg is, kind of the top WordPress guy, but they are making decisions and they are doing it as transparently as possible, where you actually can just go watch the meeting. It's about an hour and a half if anybody has some time to kill, right? So, all right.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter.
You're
So
welcome.
this is we still have a few minutes left for anything. Any questions about widgets, sidebars, what Peter discussed, headers, footers, anything other recommendations, questions? Floor is open. Unmute yourself. Floor is open. Wendy.
I am still so intimidated by the black editors.
Yeah.
Is there anything like you guys can recommend? I did the I've gone to some of these, of course, where you guys have discussed it, but I'm like I need to do it type person.
Right.
I don't know, tutorials, a good website I can go to, because I open it up and the fact that I'm looking at more of a white screen than it freaks, I'm lost from the get-go.
Well,
and so I'm very intimidated, and I feel like I'm going to be way behind.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share if any tutorials that I think are appropriate. But here's something that I was going to talk to Ray about, and Ray we discussed this, but I was thinking, some of these demos, and I appreciate that. I know that because I'm on the other end of a lot of these things where it's just like, I don't know what you're doing right now, but it looks like you're doing something. So, cool.
No, that's
Yeah,
very helpful.
but literally build a small website
Yeah,
with, a home page and about page, whatever. And we could do that in the time of this call and really just say here and do it all in the block editor.
right.
And
I know
then,
I would almost love for us to do like a hands-on even over
Yeah.
Zoom, if that's possible.
We
Yeah,
we definitely talked about that. Yeah, I
It
mean,
might be crazy, but
yeah,
I think our thing, and we have to talk about the logistics of this, is it goes back to, I think we're all going to need to be on the same
I know.
same theme, or have an environment. I think, well, the environment thing, Peter, I can talk about of at least creating a couple of temporary ones. I think that people
Yeah.
can use or sandboxes people can use. So.
Yep.
I agree, especially with the block editor. I mean, I'm very familiar with page builders and kind of classic WordPress, but you really need to get hands-on in it to.
Yes,
you know.
yeah.
And I'll tell you, the crazy part is I go back to sites that I built with, like, Page Builder, Beaver Builder, and I can't remember where certain things are. I'm literally going, all I want to do is, all I want to do is, that's why I hate the block editor. Now I'm like, all I want to do is add the thing right here, but I have to go pull it, but I'm like the opposite now using Page Builder.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? Because now
Yeah, but that's good to hear, actually. That's good to hear.
I have a question and a comment, if I can slip it in here.
Sure.
Is there a link to that? I heard about that high-end, the 4 or 5 top people talking about the Gutenberg. So if you have that link, that'd be great. And a comment for Wendy. I've just recently, this past year, thanks to the pandemic, I started building websites, and I've been using the block editor. And once you get into it, it works pretty good.
Okay.
And I've built with Cadence and Astra and WP Ocean. I don't use page builders at all anymore, and I can get a lot done. And I am not a coder at all.
Yeah.
And once you get in and do it a few times, I'm building websites in 2 to 4 hours. I mean,
oh my gosh,
you can fiddle with them for months. You know how it is, but it's a different animal now. And I think it's the future, and I think you'll find it to be. You have to get used to it. You have to understand it. But the hierarchy is way more efficient than the classic editor. And I love the classic editor, but classic editor can't do what this block editor can do.
There's definitely, especially like Cadence is one that I like. Peter recommended it. That's why I started picking up and playing with it. Cadence, the free version, there's some really great YouTube videos out there too that I forget what's his name, the WP Crafter.
Yeah, Adam.
Adam. He has some very good, like, walking you through building a site. So that's what helps too, because there are sometimes things like there's little hidden features. You need to see somebody else use it, and then like, oh, okay, that's where that thing is. So
if you use Cadence, you pretty much need the Cadence plugin, and it's free too.
Yeah.
The blocks plugin.
It's true.
And it's the same way if you use CoBlocks with GoDaddy, you need you need the Gut. There's usually no theme has it all. You usually need a little plugin with the added functionality, but you can do a lot for free, and it's so much more code efficient compared to the page builders like Beaver Builder and Elementor. And I played around with those too. Right. But if you can stay away from those, I mean, if you've been building for a long time, you know those tools.
I've already
that's a resource. I understand, but for loading on mobile and stuff, and you don't have all that complexity because more and more is coming. So, right, you want to figure out what platform you are. If you're building new today, I'm thinking you probably want to stay to the block editor, not to take away from these gentlemen. They're giving a great presentation here.
Absolutely.
It's true. Even again, it depends on the sites. I mean, I'm still very familiar with Divi. So I'm, again, for me, I'm much more productive at times with the page builders, but even with page builders, I think still being exposed to what's happening with the block editor, because that's the future. Divi itself and other page builders, they're talking about including blocks or block support. So I think they've realized, this whole thing about full site editing, Peter showed that in the slide. It's not going to replace what these page builders have done, but they need to play in that same space because this is going into WordPress core. So I think it's worthwhile for everyone to play around with the block editor if you haven't already. So
yeah, I'm Generate Press Pro and Generate Press plugin, and I can do anything that I can do a page builder, and now faster. The sites are faster. I feel, you go in there and it's all right there. And yeah, once you get to that level, you really like it. I did put a link in the chat. There's actually a WP Tavern post, and in that post, if you scroll down a little bit, is the video of this meeting, and it's really fun to watch.
Oh, great.
Cool, thank you. I want to add one more quick comment.
Sure.
With Cadence and a lot of these templates, they have pre-built templates.
Yes.
That you load up, and then you come in and it just really makes it easy for beginners.
Yep, exactly. All three of the ones that Asterisk, Generate Press, and Cadence.
Yeah.
The site starters, click, go. And then we'll do a whole thing on the block patterns, and the way the block patterns, you can just start, and even the theme developers are creating their own block patterns that work within the site. So you could just stack these things up, and all of a sudden you're dragging this in. You got a beautiful site, change out the images, put in your content, and you're like, don't give away the secret. This is getting a lot easier, for us developers.
Any other questions, comments from folks? We have just a couple minutes left.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you done a talk on how to use custom CSS in the block editor?
Now, we talk around it a lot, but I don't think we've done a CSS one, but
Or just because, so where I'm coming from, it's like I have my style for my site.
Yeah.
I don't know CSS to go in to like touch with that, but I know, like, I want to know how to edit on the page. And so there's that, it's in the block editor, right?
Yeah. Oh, so you're not actually writing CSS code, but you want more styling capabilities through the block editor?
I'm pointing to it on the screen. So
Right here.
in the block editor.
Yeah.
So when I pick on a block, there's a drop down custom CSS. So,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I could customize a particular block, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably, to get into that kind of topic, I think we'll have to touch a little bit upon just CSS in general and places to put CSS. But yeah, no, we haven't had a entire presentation devoted to CSS. We can definitely do some of that. We can talk general CSS tricks or things to consider.
Now, somebody told me, oh, you don't want to edit your CSS there. Is it, why not?
There's lots of places you can edit CSS, and whether it's adding building a thought into the theme, and then there's the custom CSS and the customizer, or at there's so many places that you can put CSS. I get confused sometimes where, like, how many style sheets are being loaded, for example. So there are best ways, and you know what, it's probably worth kind of visiting that whole topic of best practices for custom CSS within
Like one particular blog post, that's it. Like I want to just on a particular.
So maybe that's a good way to wrap up our meetup tonight. Well, we'll send out, as I said, this has all been recorded, so I'll send out a link afterwards to the recording. You can watch parts again, or if you missed anything. We'll also send out some of the links to resources that we talked about in the chat. And then for topic ideas or questions you think of afterwards, our Facebook page, please come to our Facebook page and bring up suggestions anytime. I think we like take a look at problems that you're having or sharing other news and information. And I definitely like the idea of we like to, if possible, do some more hands-on things so we're not the only ones demoing. So we'll talk about trying to do something like that in the future.
Yeah, and if you're not comfortable with Facebook, the meetup.com, you can place messages there, and we do get notified on those too. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Good night. Thank you.
Joining us. Have a good night. We'll see you again next month.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.